Hi, everyone. Welcome. We are going to get started in just a moment. Just waiting for folks to filter in. Love those emojis. Hi, if you're just joining us, we're going to get started in a minute or two, waiting for folks to filter in.
I wish I could see the people.
Yeah. All right, we're just going to give it one more minute. I still see this number is still ticking up. So just one more minute and then we'll get started. Thanks so much to everyone for being here. Okay. So let's jump in. Welcome everyone. My name is Dagny Brown. I'm co-director at the San Francisco Disability Cultural Center, along with Emily Badix and Mika Weissbuch. Some access notes before we get started. If you'd like more personalized captions from stream text, you can access them at dcc.page/captions. And we're going to pop that in the chat right now. So today's program is a Zoom webinar, so only our panelists can turn on their video and provide audio. And we're using the chat just for sharing critical links with you all. However, we welcome you to use the Q&A like it's a chat room. And so you can also ask your questions there and get tech assistance as needed. If that virtual space is not accessible to you during the live program, but you'd like to know what happened later, you can email us at access@disabilityculturalcenter, and we will email it to you. All right. Today's program is presented by the San Francisco Disability Cultural Center, which is a collaboration led by the Elsie and Lily Cox Haven of Hope, with support from the Paul K. Longmore Institute on Disability at San Francisco State. And it's all made possible thanks to the financial contributions from the City of San Francisco's Human Services Agency's Department of Disability and Aging Services. All right. The Disability Cultural Center has many more events coming up in the next, well, in perpetuity. We are here, we are permanent, but our calendar on our website has events for the rest of August and September, including a follow-up conversation to this panel, a community conversation at Cafe Crip. So you can get all of that information at disabilityculturalcenter.org/calendar. And now I will pass it on to my colleague Mika, who will be moderating today's panel on care work and direct action. Thanks so much, y'all.
Thanks, Dagny. Hi, everyone. And thanks so much for joining us today. My name is Mika, and as Dagny said, I'm one of the co-directors of the San Francisco Disability Cultural Center. I'm a mixed race, non-binary, neuro-umami person. I have short, dark brown hair with waves and mountains, shaved on the sides and back, and I'm wearing a gray collared shirt. And behind me is a virtual background with the DCC logo, with headphones and a mask with flowers and vibrant colors. So on to today's topic on care work and direct action. Disabled people have always played a role in direct action. In fact, the future home of the DCC sits across the street from where the 504 occupation took place, where disabled folks led the longest successful takeover of a government building in US history. Today, we're talking about the care and innovation disabled people bring to movement spaces. And I'm super grateful to be in conversation with the phenomenal activists, Jesenia M. and Max Airborne. And unfortunately, Anita Cameron, who was supposed to be with us today as well, had something come up last minute and won't be able to join us. So we'll start with Max, who I've had the privilege of rolling with in direct action spaces for a free Palestine. I really appreciate how Max shows up, bringing so much care and impressive tactical skills to organizing spaces. So I'll turn it over to you, Max, to introduce yourself, give a visual description, and answer first question. What is your definition of direct action, and what's your relationship to it?
Okay. Well, thank you so much for inviting me to be on this panel. I'm really excited. And I've enjoyed the conversations we've had leading up to it. It feels like really important community building. Okay, so my name is Max Airborne. I am involved in direct action in the Bay Area, mostly for Palestine right now, but generally I have been involved for a number of years in a variety of anti-oppression direct actions. My visual description is that I am a 50-something white, fat person with shaved sides of my hair and brown hair on the top. I'm wearing dark green glasses. I am wearing a green and blue striped shirt over a blue t-shirt. And behind me is green walls with lots of art. I like the color green. That's maybe I should say that as part of my identity. Okay, so what is direct action and what is my relationship to it? So to me, direct action, I feel like it's defined broadly. In my mind, it is sort of any kind of action that is attempting to directly block harm. And that can also be looked at broadly. So a lot of times direct action is attempting to kind of either put yourself in the way of yourself. That could be either your body or your voice or your, like so many things, right? Put yourself in some way in the way of harm being caused. And that could also be putting yourself in the way of like business as usual in an attempt to either block harm directly or also raise awareness, right? You're actually causing the world to stop in some way in order to raise awareness about an issue. For example, stopping the bridge traffic. You know, it's like you're raising awareness. And so where I am in all of this is I do a lot of support for civil disobedience. I'm either in civil disobedience or supporting civil disobedience to be happening. And my main interest, like for the last 10 years or so, like since the beginning of Black Lives Matter, is really like, how do we bring disabled people, to the extent that disabled people and individuals want to be doing this, how do we bring them in and be as inclusive as possible, and also utilize the power of disabled bodies in a consent kind of way to be doing civil disobedience. Because when I got involved in civil disobedience in the Bay, in Black Lives Matter, there were some people who really were keen to support me to figure out how to use my body, my mobility device, you know, my abilities as they are in the most powerful way. And that was incredible to experience that. Like, oh, I can be part of this, and someone can support me to figure out what are my particular powers in a direct action, in a blocking something kind of way. And that was really incredible. It really changed my life. And I really want to give that to anybody who wants it, you know? So that's my main relationship to direct action right now. I think that's it. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Max, for that definition and introducing yourself. Jesenia, we'll turn to you. You've been instrumental in bringing protests to online spaces. Will you introduce yourself in a visual description and your answer, your definition of direct action and relationship to it?
Thank you, Mika. This is Jesenia. My visual description: I am a brown-skinned, Native, Indigenous, Latina woman. I have black hair with lots of different colors in it, shaved head on the sides, and I am wearing pink glasses, a red dress, and my virtual background of red and green colors. I really thought a lot about this question, and I couldn't come to a succinct answer, but listening to Max's answer just made me realize, like, yeah, that's it, right? Like, I want to say ditto, but it's the disruption, right? The disruption of not business as normal. And direct doesn't have to only be your physical presence as well, right? Like, stopping a meeting for an access hold is disruption, and we are disrupting the norms of what has been created that is making the world so inaccessible to so many people. It reminds me of how when we do studies about what is like the average body or the average size or the average human shape, no one fits that model. Like, it literally fits nobody. So no one is served by these amalgamations. And so all that's to say is that, to me, direct action is something that you are doing that is more than what was there before, right? And that could be in whatever role fits. You know, we all have a different role, and it's going to be the thing that brings you joy, the thing that gives you purpose, or that lights you up, or to channel your anger, right, into something that is helping another person disrupt the systems, or even just typing an email or voice memoing a friend to say, how are you doing? That's all care work. All that care work is direct action. And even if it feels like I'm not making a difference, I'm not making a dent, it is, because it's impacting that person's life, and that has ripple effects in their capacity to be able to do more to help other people and themselves. So I think that's where I would say is, like, direct action is any action that is disrupting the status quo.
Well, thank you so much for your beautiful and expansive definitions of direct action. Max, I know you've seen the contrast between organizing spaces that center care and access and those where access is an afterthought and folks literally get left behind. So can you start us off by sharing some of the barriers you've seen disabled people face in inaccessible activist spaces and what you think needs to change?
Okay, I made a long list. So I feel like the most obvious barrier and also the most common barrier is inaccessible meeting spaces. I've certainly known people who received invitations to get involved in something, but then they couldn't actually get into the building, you know, to be in the meeting. Oh, I see in the text, Anita is here. Do we want to bring her in? There we go. Should I
Hi,
keep
Anita.
going?
Hi everyone. Sorry I'm late. I was in the hospital and I'm home now, but I'm still not exactly the best. Pardon me, my tardiness.
Well, thanks for being with us, Anita. And would you like to introduce yourself and
Sure.
give
My
a
name.
visual description, and then I'll have you answer a question afterwards.
Sure. My name's Anita Cameron. I'm a disability justice activist. Been doing this for 43 years. I am a Black woman with kind of caramel colored skin and long locks and wearing a kind of beige shirt that says phenomenal woman. My background is actually from 34 years ago. It's me participating in the Capitol call, helping carry someone's wheelchair.
Thanks so much, Anita, for introducing yourself. And we were just going over the definitions, your definition of direct action and your relationship to it. Well, we'll come back then to Anita and Max. I would love you to continue where you left off. Yeah, talking about some of the barriers.
Okay, so not being able to attend a meeting, that's a barrier. And also lack of information about access, you know, like if I generally have access needs that go unmet and I look at, you know, we're going to have this march that's going to start here and that's the only information I have about it, I'm probably not going to go. You know, I don't know how far the march is. I don't know anything about, like, will I be able to go to the bathroom? It will require me to do so much research on my own that I just won't go. So that's exclusion, right? That's a barrier. I feel like there's an approach around creating access that it's like a way to accommodate specific people and requests. And I feel like that's a barrier because then it's still like relying on people to make the requests. Like I recently heard someone organizing a march saying they weren't going to have a wheelchair accessible vehicle trail the march because they hadn't had anyone request it. But, you know, if anyone in a wheelchair is there and their wheelchair dies, then they're screwed if there's no wheelchair accessible vehicle. So like, it's just a good practice, you know, if you're going to have a march, have a wheelchair accessible vehicle at the end. It's pretty basic. But then also the approach that there's like a simple checklist that we can do to make everything accessible. Like a checklist can help, but it's not enough actually. And I know that sounds like a tall ask, but really creating true access is actually about listening and being flexible. Because you don't know what's going to come up. There's going to be an access need you never heard of, and it's going to come up, and it could be anybody. It doesn't have to be a disabled person. So like kind of reframing how you think about what access even is, I think is vital. I've often seen disabled people kind of put in spaces or roles that are based on some kind of assumption about what disabled people, and I'm saying that with air quotes, because it's who gets perceived as disabled rather than who actually like identifies. They get put in spaces or roles that they didn't consent to. And so I feel like the issue there is like not being in relationship with disabled people enough to like ask like what's a good idea here, and not being like co-conspirators with disabled people and creating an event together so that everyone just gets input in a way that makes it more likely to be accessible. And then another barrier, I'm going kind of fast because I'm worried my list is long. So attempts to do something more accessible, but not communicating about it. Like, so for example, at a march, deciding that disabled people should be in the front and lead the pace of the march. And sometimes that happens consensually and sometimes it happens non-consensually. But unless you tell the march that that's what you're doing, the march people, the rest of the people in the march are not going to know how to behave related to the fact that disabled people are in the front. And so a lot of times it's kind of ridiculous. Disabled people start in the front. I'm talking mostly about people with mobility devices right now, which is certainly not all disabled people. They'll start in the front and people will just want to go fast. And so they kind of rush past the people in wheelchairs, and the whole point is moot. And then ironically, disabled people in the wheelchairs end up getting left behind in some way, so it's a problem. So communication is really important. And then just generally not supporting disabled folks in action. I recently know of a situation where there was one person using a wheelchair at an action, and the whole group got arrested, and the one person in the wheelchair got separated, even though like people objected and whatever, like no one could support that person, because everybody else was getting arrested too. And that's a problem, because then the cops have total unobstructed freedom to do whatever they want with the disabled person. And that's something that it would be really good for us to be thinking about when we're doing actions that are likely to result in arrest. Like if there's a disabled person, there should be 2 disabled people at least. And there should also be someone waiting outside who's not going to get arrested, who will be there for the disabled person or people who get arrested. And so also the sort of not acknowledging care as important in an action. Like we all have bodies. We all have bodies. We all need water. We all need food. We all need to go to the bathroom. We all have pain. So we might need Tylenol or whatever non-branded name you might have for that kind of thing, and I think a lot of people who are not disabled might forget those things, and not or think that they're extra and don't bother with it. This is bare bones. We're not going to do that, No, we need that. That's really important, and it's important to the culture of doing the kind of work together. And so what I think needs to change is as I alluded to earlier, that disabled people actually need to be directly involved in the creation of a group and in the creation of an event or an action from the very beginning. A lot of times disabled people get invited in as like experts on access, which I'm saying in air quotes, kind of near the end of an action after it's already been decided where the action is and what the tactics are and those kinds of things. And that is so stressful for everyone, really. And it doesn't really work. If you really want to do it well, disabled people need to actually be part of forming your groups and forming your actions. And I really can't stress enough that I think all of us as organizers really need to learn about disability justice as a philosophy, as a set of practices, and really like adopt the principles of disability justice into the foundations of our groups. And then also all of the things that our groups do, you know, and stop thinking about the needs of disabled people as like being in the way. You know, we actually all have needs. And I'll talk about this a little bit later when we talk about sort of cripping the movement and crip wisdom. But like, there's a lot of wisdom that comes from the things you have to do as a disabled person that actually supports everybody. And so like the opportunity to actually think about the needs of disabled people is really important. And it's really important to creating a movement that does what we sort of claim we want to do, which is we want to dismantle the systems that we don't like, that are oppressing us. And we want to build new systems or new ways of doing things that don't oppress us, right? So also, just like, as I said about the arrest thing, include support people at every stage, you know, support people, even if you're just like having a meeting, have a support person who's gonna, you know, make sure everyone has what they need and nobody's suffering, you know, like it's just a role and everybody can take turns doing it. So those are the main things that come to mind. And I'll also add one more thing, which is don't be afraid of disabled people, right? We are people. And I think a lot of times people are afraid of disabled people and also afraid of like messing up. They want to do it right. They don't want to mess up, but they're too scared to actually ask the disabled people directly. And you know what? You can ask me anything, and I might not be every disabled person, but I want a world where we can actually like ask each other what we need, you know, like, hey, Mika, what do you need to be here? What do you need to feel included in this meeting? Is there anything missing? You know, like I want to just ask everybody that so that everybody's comfortable. And can we allow that to be part of our culture? So, okay, I'll stop for now. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Max. I really appreciate the concrete examples that you bring to this conversation. Anita, I want to turn to you if you're up for it. I know you've been organizing for 43 years. You've been arrested 140 times. And you've spent decades advocating for disabled rights, civil rights with ADAPT. What can we learn from you and from ADAPT about making protests more accessible and centering disability in our actions?
Well, for me, I have to say I've been spoiled by being in ADAPT as far as organizing protests and marches, which are part of direct action. But direct action can also be like rallies, they can be vigils, they can be you know, press conferences, all of that can be included in direct action, and it does not have to include arrests. I've had, to be quite honest, there are very, very few actions, parades or anything of that matter that I have participated in with non-disabled people, um, simply because we're not even prepared for, um, we're an afterthought, if that. And a lot of organizations don't know us and our needs because they don't see disabled people as, um, somebody, they don't see us as being able to, like we need help, all the time. That's the thing, probably the nicest I've heard, folks with disabilities, uh, non-disabled folks always wanting to help us. When we don't want or need it, and then they get upset. But, you know, it means nothing when, your establishments are not accessible or the things that you do that are exclusive, to people. So, I was listening to Max and what he was saying, and I agree because we have to be in on the ground floor. That's just all there is to it. And don't expect us to come to you all the time. You get over to us, and then you involve us from A to Z, in what you're doing, and involve us in meaningful ways, not in ways that that other us or, ways that tokenize us or whatnot. Include us in meaningful ways throughout the entire project. And when you're doing, your marches and whatnot, we have to be in on the ground floor because too often, they tell us, "Oh, we're going to take this route," with no thought whatever to disabled people. I've experienced being left 3 blocks behind in a Black Lives Matter protest, trying to tell them, "Look, you can't do this." I could have been snatched up by the police and you never knew, you know. Um, a lot of times the organizations don't really want us, around. The reasons that I've been given are when you're asking for access needs and stuff like that, that takes away from us. So what they feel is that, um, even centering disabled, even being concerned about the access needs and whatnot, means that you're taking from them. This is how they see it. You're taking from them and centering it about you. That's what I've heard a lot from organizations that, they don't want to, they don't want to deal. They think meeting access needs to be too complex or cost money, money that they don't have. Because, it's always about money when we disabled get involved or included, unfortunately. Um, yeah, we have a price put on our freedom and our civil rights as disabled people. And so we have to, in this, if we're doing direct action that is inclusive, we have to be, involved, and they have to come to us. Don't wait for us to come to them. I hear so many organizations complain about the lack of participation of disabled people, and they jump all over us and tell us we don't support their causes. No, it's not that we don't support your cause. You don't make, you don't make your marches, you don't make the places you are, anything like that accessible to disabled people. And often when you do, the environment isn't welcoming. You know what I mean? It's like the environment, it's like I guess we'll tolerate you, because we have to, you know. And when you come in with that kind of spirit, with that kind of energy, it's you're not gonna have, success, and you're not gonna have us as disabled people, out there, in contributing to, the greatness of what you're doing. Um, it's not going to happen. So I think that's one of the biggest things. Stop looking at disabled people as a problem. That's the thing. We're seen as problems. And, the only time that, you know, I run into non-disabled people, they're all so busy. Oh, do you need help? Let me help you. Let me do this. But when you actually need real help, or when the access needs are, it's they don't want to deal with us. So, my thing is I've been speaking, to a lot of non-disabled organizations, and I'm actually about to go on a community where most likely I will be, probably one of the very few disabled, to say stop looking at us as problems, as broken, as look at us, stop seeing us as problems. We have a real culture, we have real life, real, real all of that, and they need to stop seeing us as problems and as real, people who are interested in, the cause, you know,
Thanks.
how are you helping your cause by excluding?
Thanks so much for your reflections, Anita. We're gonna turn now to Jesenia, and you've made protests accessible to so many and eliminated barriers by organizing online. Can you talk more about that work and how folks are coming together in virtual activist spaces?
Absolutely. Thank you. One of the ways that we organize online is by creating spaces that are accessible to multiple people with multiple access needs. And that does include creating access frictions, right? Where someone's access needs might actually conflict with another person's access needs, and then have that negotiation, right? Having the openness and the care for our community to be willing to have those conversations. And we do that by creating spaces where we have live events like virtual protest, and also spaces where we can have asynchronous planning so that people who are non-speaking or nonverbal or have processing, have more time for processing, and creating spaces where people can come as they are in their wholeness, right? And that means that some people have never been in community and are learning how to engage in community for the first time. So one of the programs I mentioned, Virtual Protest, was created by myself and another person I found that we became mutuals on TikTok, talking about Free Palestine. And I also created an organization called One Free Community, and we reached out to our community to say, anybody want to help us make this project happen? And so we just gathered whoever was available, and we produced an event where we watched other people at their protests. And each virtual protest is different. It could be about a different topic. Like we've covered Free Palestine, Congo, Sudan, long COVID. It could be with a different group of people. So each time we've produced it with volunteers who showed up who had capacity at the time that we found out. Many of these happen very emergently, very last minute, because we find out about them a day or two before people are on the streets. And so what we do is we will look for a live stream. Either that's somebody on the phone, on their phone at the protest, or a YouTube feed, and then we air that on multiple places. Sometimes those change. Sometimes it's on the Calling Up Justice Twitch page. Sometimes it's on the One Free Community TikTok page. Sometimes we gather in Gather Town in the digital encampment. All of these spaces were created by myself or Calling Up Justice, or as places for people to gather, find each other, and be able to access the movement work in the way that works best for them, whether that's because they're unsafe, can't travel, are homeless or houseless, have a disability and the space is inaccessible, or people at the protests aren't masking or sufficiently COVID cautious enough to make it safe for people to feel comfortable attending, or their parents, or have jobs that don't allow them to travel. So whatever the reason may be, we're trying to create places and spaces where people can come as they are and do as much or as little as they have capacity to give.
Thanks, Jesenia. Max, I want to come back to something you were talking about in the beginning, how, you were talking about the ways that indirect action, disabled bodies can be like used in such powerful ways. So can you talk about what wisdom and tactics you've seen disabled folks to bring to movement spaces?
Well, let's see. In terms of like physical direct action, I feel like I've seen multiple examples of the power of wheelchairs, particularly wheelchairs that are also supported by other able-bodied people present, not just by ourselves, but like, so recently I was part of an action where we were trying to do a blockade of something. And did I freeze? Oh no, there I am. We were trying to do a blockade of something, and it looked like it might not become possible because they were starting to put up like barriers. And me and the two other wheelchair using people in the action, the the tactical person had decided we weren't going to go ahead because it looked like it was just going to be too hard. And me and the two other wheelchair people were just like, we instinctively just kind of disobeyed this order and or this, sentiment. And we went over to where there was just like a little crack, and we started trying to get in. And the people like holding the barriers were like confused by us, which is really powerful. They were confused by us and me saying, oh, I can't back up. I need you to let me in so I can turn around, which was a total lie. And we basically like were able to get in and get the blockade actually happening because we weren't afraid to keep moving forward. And I think that maybe the group had initially sort of felt a little bit like scared and wanting to be careful on our behalf, but we were actually not afraid, and we wanted to get in there and do everything we could to make that blockade happen, and we did. So like that I feel like that's just one little example of the way that like our bodies are powerful, and our tools that we use for access are powerful in ways that might surprise people who don't use them, right? And so like that's part of why I'm like, ask disabled people, try to figure out what everyone's actual powers are, because maybe we have powers as people in wheelchairs, as blind people, as deaf people. I don't even know, right? It's beyond my knowing, but like, let's figure it out. I feel like I got that from my friend Sandra, who's a fat attorney doing civil rights work, and she very much believes that like everyone has unique powers, and that there's like unique powers to being in each different kind of body. And I've really learned that from her, and I feel like it's true. And I want to help us unearth what those are so that we can be as powerful as possible. So that's just like
That's
one
why it's so,
example. Hmm?
that's why
Yeah.
it's so important to include us in from the ground, you know. And I think a lot of times when non-disabled people plan stuff, it's they don't scout. That's what we call it in adapt beforehand. You have to go and look, you know, plan, scout your route, you know, and all what's accessible, what isn't. And what you do is you take folks with various disabilities with you, you know, and you can scout, you know, you can actually, you know, scout and not even be um, paid attention to, if you will, because a lot of times folks, you know, who are using wheelchairs or folks who are blind and whatnot, they don't expect us to do the things we do. I can't tell you how many places ADAPT has gotten into because of the tactics that we use. You know, we protested the Judge Rottenberg Center because of the devices that they use to shock their residents. Um, and in 2016, you know, we marched, oh, probably a good 20 miles, and actually got into, we were the first group that actually got onto the property, um, and managed to shut down the building. Um, and we were arrested, but our charges were dropped because the sheriff that arrested us had testified before the United Nations about the situation at you know, over at Judge Rottenberg Center at JRC. So, you know, we didn't even, but you know, that's the thing. You know, we are so creative as people with disabilities to be able to, you know, to tell you, you know, you really need us to make those marches, you know, accessible, you know, and adapt. You know, we bring water and snacks, you know, for everyone, and people just have this habit of, if you got snacks on you or what not, go around and ask, hey, do you need this? You know, do you want that? You know, and whatnot. We try to, if we're getting lunch at our actions, make sure that we have vegetarian and vegan options. Here lately, you know, I retired. I retired in 2023. Was my last March, but shortly before I retired from ADAPT, I did create COVID protocols, you know, for us, you know, involving the masking and the distancing, you know, and making sure that things were sanitary and that we had uh, different types of masks and whatnot for everyone, including like the clear ones, like, so if you're deaf, you can, you know, read the lips and whatnot. So, you know, it, in order to have a successful march, you know, it's like, get rid of your fear of disabled people, because I agree with Max. Get rid of the fear of disabled people. Get take out your mind that um, we can't that we can't do logistics or anything like that. I mean, I've been involved in marches where things changed on a dime, and everything that we planned, you know, things change. And adapt, we have this concept called what if. Well, what, you know, to be prepared for. What if this happens? What if that? What if that? What if that? So that if we plan a protest and things go awry, we already know what we're going to do, you know, because we planned ahead and had second, third, fourth, fifth, you know, whatever. So I'll stop there.
Thanks so much, Anita, for sharing. Jesenia, do you want to add anything on how you've seen disabled folks make direct action more successful?
Absolutely. We have a resiliency and a care for each other that is sustainable when we can connect to each other. And that is really powerful. And that one of the main questions that I get often for people who see us doing virtual protests and they come in, how does this help? How is virtual protesting doing anything? Because they only see protesting as physical bodies in the way, right? Or, doing some kind of destructive work. And we do need to dismantle and destroy, but not everybody has that. And I see people who show up who have so much creativity, so many great suggestions on how we communicate, or these care networks already exist in the disability community and are growing stronger every day. And we, just by the mere presence of mentioning our access needs, makes everyone in the room go, oh my God, I didn't even think about that. Like the other day, I virtually, we all saw how hybrid was so helpful and influential in helping us be part of the community and try to dismantle some of that ugly laws that existed and exist still to today with keeping us away from public life. And connecting virtually is a way for us to be able to re-engage and stay engaged in the way that is most accessible and sustainable for us and for a lot of people. So I was hybrid calling into an in-person mutual aid meeting, and they had all these great ideas. They were all younger group of people, really great ideas, so motivated. And I said, okay, but how are we going to help everybody else if we haven't helped ourselves? Have you guys asked yourselves what your needs are? What is your need in this room? And is there somebody else in this room who can meet that need? Maybe not, but naming those needs is extremely powerful. And being in crib spaces is where we learn how to practice this, and we unlearn that we don't need to be perfect and we don't need to do it right every single time, and that conflict will happen and that's okay. And we learn how to do the abolition work that is, and not canceling us, not throwing people away, but really caring and really bringing in your wholeness into whatever it is you do. So if all you can do is knit or lick stamps or send an email or make a phone call, like, it doesn't matter what it is that you can do, somebody out there needs that help. And somebody out there wants to include that, but we have to make those spaces accessible. So if disabled people aren't, like Max and Anita both said, if disabled people aren't there from the beginning of the planning, you're already making it exclusionary, and we need to be more inclusive.
Yes, thank you, Jesenia. Max.
That's the thing that we've been doing lately in the depth is virtual, like all of our actions that are out there on the street, we have a virtual component of that action where people can participate virtually. So that's, because you can do anything. I lift up all forms of activism because you can do it from your bed. I have a friend who does all kinds of activism from his bed. He even directs like videos, music videos and whatnot from his bed. So there's all kinds of ways as disabled people that we can do activism, and we can't, have that, discounted.
Yeah, totally. Thanks, Anita. Max, final quick question for you. What advice do you have for organizers trying to bring accessibility to their communities?
I would say invite disabled people in and build relationships. I feel like we can't do any of this without relationship building. That's like the heart, actually, And that is where the wisdom and the knowledge of what people actually need will come from. And from there, we can, make our events include all the kinds of people we have relationships with, and we can keep broadening that. Yeah, I feel like that's vital. If we want to like crip the movement, as we've talked about so much, we have to be building relationships and allowing crip wisdom to actually enter our consciousness. Like crip wisdom is like, oh, I have a body and I'm going to live in this body the way that it is, even if it's hard and it might not be fixable, and so where do I learn how to do that? Well, I learned how to do that by making friends with other crips who are also in their bodies, and they're figuring out how to live their best lives in their bodies. That's where I learned how to do that too. And we need each other to do that. We need to recognize that we have to do all of this together. It's not that we can't have autonomy and body sovereignty. We can, and we need each other. We need, we need each other to do all of this. And so let's act like that's actually true, rather than trying to pretend it's not true. And yeah, that's what advice I have. Love disabled people, make friends.
Yeah.
I want to have another call where we actually are talking to disabled people, because I feel like almost everything I've said here is to non-disabled people. And actually, we could have this whole panel again talking to other disabled people. And it would look a little different,
Right.
Thank you.
Thank you, Max. Jesenia, we have 1 minute if you have anything to add.
Thank you. I did see a question about security and culture, and I think that this is important because we're in digital spaces and in physical spaces, and we have to take care of each other. So it's really about having that conversation from the beginning. How do you handle conflict? What are your abolitionist policies? What is your transformative justice policy? How are you going to handle somebody who's brand new, who comes in and starts claiming all of this harm, like understanding the definition and the difference between harm and right to comfort, right? Like these are all these things that we can talk about. I will drop in the chat or in the answer a link to Calling Up Justice has a rapid response thing where I teach a workshop on how to do online moderation for events. So that's something that you can book us for as well. Or, we do have a radical generosity policy as well. So there's lots of different ways. And like, we don't need to reinvent the wheel. Someone's already figured this out. We just need to connect to each other and share those resources and share those skills with each other.
Thank you. Anita, Max, Jesenia, so much gratitude. I wish we had more time. Thank you for this rich discussion and for bringing so much care for your work to the work that you do. Thank you to our access team, and thank you to all of you here who show up in all the ways that you do in the streets and online, on the front lines and behind the scenes. Shout out to all my Care Bears out there. And thank you for making movements more accessible, for your dedication and for your love. We keep us safe. Hope to see you next week at Cafe Crip. It's next Friday at 12 p.m. to continue this conversation so we can all be in conversation together, not just a few of us on the panel. So hope to see you there and have a wonderful rest of your evening.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, everyone.
Bye.